So first up, we have Anna Poblets. So she's the head of passwordless at 1Password, and she's going to talk to you all about why credential managers are really vital to not just the past of authentication, but the future of FIDO and passkeys. So please help me welcome Anna Poblets.
Good morning, everyone. How are we doing? All right. I'm Anna. I work at 1Password, and I'm really excited today to talk about credential managers. And it's going to be a lot of history, sort of evolution of password managers over time, and kind of how I see us playing a role in passkeys, both now and going forward. So like any good talk about passkeys, we probably have to start with passwords, but I'll try to keep it brief. We all have tons and tons of passwords, right, for every website or service that you use. Or maybe worse, hopefully no one in this room, but you might have a single password that you use for every website that you have. This, of course, is a security problem. People are reusing all these passwords everywhere. And the way we decided to fix this as an industry was things like password policies and password rotation, like forcing people to try to use stronger passwords. But all that really did was create a really big user experience problem, right? It was really difficult for people to do this. If you're like me, I think I have 200 passwords in my 1Password right now. And so there's no feasible way that I could think up and remember passwords for all of those. So if people want to be secure, I don't think they're trying to use the same password everywhere. It's just that with passwords, all of the burden to be secure falls onto the user. Password managers were created to address this specific problem, right? To remove some of that burden of password security from users. The core purpose is pretty simple. It's just to make it easy for users to generate strong, secure passwords and then store them in one place securely. They address this need for security and productivity simultaneously, where people no longer need to create or think up long, complex passwords, and they're able to access them with like one-click autofill sign-in. If you use a password manager today, you're probably familiar with that experience. A really important part of a password manager's core functionality is the security model. So I'm going to kind of briefly tell you how 1Password works. This is not how other password managers work. Everyone's a little bit different, but a lot of the concepts are really similar. And I think it helps just to kind of give you an idea of how we think about security. Because obviously we hold all of your credential data. That makes us a very natural target for attackers. So there's three main components to this. The first is how a user logs into 1Password. We use two different keys. So we have an account password, which is just a password, and then a secret key, which is a unique key that's generated on your device, and it never leaves your device. So we combine these two things together to be the credential that actually unlocks 1Password, which means your credential has more entropy. It's also tied to the device to some degree. The second component is how we actually verify that credential. We use something called Secure Remote Password, or SRP, and you don't really need to know anything about how that works, but the important thing is that you can verify credentials without actually sending them over a network, right? So we are able to leave the account password and secret key on your device, but still verify your credentials remotely. And then the final component is client-side encryption, right? So that account password, that secret key stay on your device. They are also used to generate the decryption key for all of your data. And so we have this end-to-end encrypted story where your data is never available to 1Password. 1Password also works offline, which is another nice perk. So most password managers kind of started here, right? They were initially created to respond to a really specific need to help people make better passwords. And that value really resonated, but there was really a lot more to it than that we could do. It wasn't enough for us to just give people a place to securely store their credentials. You also had to be able to use them, right? They needed to be able to work on every website on the internet and every platform that's out there, right? That was a really important part of that usability story. So if you think first about the sort of one-click sign-in, intelligent autofill experience that you would see today in a password manager, that was really, really difficult. Especially in the early days, there were no system-level autofill APIs available, and we had to work on every single website across the whole internet. And I think that only really works if there's some sort of like shared assumption about how authentication should work on the internet. And that's certainly not the case, right? Every website sort of has their own implementation of login and how things should work. So we really had to put so much work, years and years of work, and still today, into making that a good, easy experience to sort of click that browser pop-up and immediately sign into a website. The other part of this is the cross-device syncing. This has been a really core part of password manager functionality and something that we've had to think about well before we ever sort of came across this problem with passkeys. And so, I have a pretty hybrid experience. I have an Android device and an Apple laptop, and sometimes for work I have to use a variety of other different devices. And so I need my credentials to be available on all of those devices, no matter what. Otherwise, it's not convenient, I'm not productive, things are way, way harder. And so this is a problem that we've always been facing, and so we've had to put a ton of work into doing that. Over time, we realized there was actually a lot more that we could do to help, specifically around storing different types of data, right? And so more than just usernames and passwords, we could store other types of credentials. We could store TOTP codes, we could store security questions. We could also store non-credential data, so you can store credit cards or airline reward numbers or arbitrary documents. Whatever it is that you need, you can store it, and it's all in one place, and it's easily accessible from any device. The other big evolution in password managers was realizing that we're in a really unique position to help people understand their security posture. We can kind of notice when, say, like a website has a breach and they have a password on that website and they might need to rotate it. We can let them know when multi-factor authentication or passkeys might be available on that website, and we can prompt them to upgrade. We can help guide them to improve their security in that way. So because the fact that all of their credentials are in one place, we can actually help them manage their overall security. This evolution has really resulted in password managers, or probably more aptly named credential managers, because we store a lot more than just passwords, becoming a really critical part of a user's digital life. I think the same way you have like a home where you store all your physical belongings, you also now have a credential manager where you can store all of the items and things you need for your digital life. On top of that, you can also share those items with the people you trust, right? You can create families, and you can share data with your families. You can manage identity for your children on the internet. All of those types of things that you would need to do in your life, you can do with your credential manager. And so it's not just about being a security tool for people to use, it's also about being a productivity tool for people to use. More recently, passkeys have entered the scene, and I think this is kind of where we can really shine. I think what I'm seeing is a story that's really similar to like the password manager story and evolution I've just been telling. And so if you think first in terms of security, passwords were created to secure websites or services, but people were reusing these passwords, and so there was this security problem. And so password managers, we could solve that to a degree, right? We could make it a little easier for users, but passkeys were solving that problem at a much more fundamental level. We're able to completely remove the password, we get unphishable authentication, and there's no burden on the user to think up good passwords and stuff like that. So that's great. But on the user experience side, I think there's still some challenges we're facing, right? Like, you can't really store your passkeys in the same place as the rest of your digital life. And every platform or website has a slightly different passkey experience that can be kind of unfamiliar to users, right? They might see it one place and another place, and they're called different things, or it's a slightly different experience. And so these user experience problems are things that credential managers have been thinking about and tackling for years and years. And so I think it's really natural to think, could a credential manager help solve some of these user experience problems that we're facing with passkeys? We have built a lot of trust with our users over the last 18 years in the case of 1Password, and we know that passkeys can be kind of confusing and unfamiliar at first. But when a user is trying to log into a website and they see a 1Password or a Dashlane or a Google pop-up in the corner of their browser, they know that that is a trusted, secure way to log into a website, right? That is their go-to way of logging in. And so if we can give that same familiar experience with passkeys, then we can really help with like the awareness and the trust around passkeys because we're meeting people where they're at. We're not asking them to learn a whole new technology and decide that it's good enough for them. We are meeting them exactly where they're at and giving them that familiar experience. So we did this in 1Password, and many other credential managers also have. At 1Password, we launched this about a month ago in GA, where you can kind of autofill passkeys in your browser. And just in that last month, we've had over 150,000 users create over 300,000 passkeys, which is really, really exciting. And I think it really shows that like, people want to use this. They want this accessibility of passkeys. The other aspect to user experience I talked about is creating a great cross-platform experience. So managing credentials across these devices is something we've always done, and it's a really core functionality. So why not also translate that to passkeys? When I think about platform support, it's a little of a bit of a mixed bag right now, right? Some platforms have really great passkey support. Some are still working on it or don't have any passkey support yet. And even within the ones that do, you can still only sync those passkeys within that single ecosystem. But with 1Password or any credential manager, you can do that across platform. And so I can log into a website on a Linux device in a Firefox browser with a 1Password passkey, and that's not something I can do with any other passkey that's out there. It's really, really cool to see. And so we have this like incredible cross-platform experience. People already have all of their other credentials in a password manager, and so we can sync all of your credentials, passwords, passkeys, TOTP codes, whatever it is, across all of these different devices. I think the best version of this is really what's happening right now. We're kind of all working together to kind of make this passwordless future real. Companies like Google, Apple, Microsoft, the major platforms, have this enormous reach. They can reach billions of people, and they have this ability to educate the masses in a way that, quite frankly, credential managers never will, right? But on the other hand, we can really help with adoption among our customer bases by meeting them where they're at. They already know and trust us as a way to log in, and so it's not a huge leap for them. It's very familiar. And so I think a rising tide really lifts all ships, and there's a really great way for us to all work together to do this. As the ecosystem matures, especially with the introduction of third-party passkeys, there are definitely some interesting challenges. One is really like, how do we give consumers as much control as possible over their passkeys? This is actually a problem we face right now. How do you give users control to move all of their credentials between different providers? Some of you might know this, but right now, if you wanted to move from 1Password to Dashlane or vice versa, the way you would do that is you would download a plain text CSV file of all of your passwords, and then you would upload it into the other provider, which obviously is not a good way to do that, but it's just sort of been the status quo for decades at this point. And so, but with the introduction of passkeys, if we do that, that just makes it phishable auth, right? It kind of takes away all of the good security properties of passkeys. And so we've been working within the FIDO Alliance on a way to do secure, like end-to-end encrypted import, yes, Nick, import and export of passkeys between these different providers. And I think, obviously that's going to be an incredible improvement for passkeys, but I think what's really cool is that it's actually an improvement for all types of credentials, right? The introduction of this more secure type of authentication in passkeys has actually inspired a change that will then affect all types of credentials and kind of improve credential manager security across the board, which I think makes it really, really powerful. Another challenge we're working on is differentiating between trusted and secure third-party providers and malicious ones. This is a pretty hard problem, but how does a website or a platform or a user know the difference between a passkey from 1Password or Bitwarden or Apple that is going through all of this work and certification and adhering to all of these requirements, and just like a malicious browser extension that creates passkeys and then just uses them on the side, right? And so we're working on this as well in the FIDO Alliance a lot right now, and I really feel that it's a hard problem, but it's really, really important, especially in a high assurance environment, for these providers to be able to prove who we are and to be able to add additional layers of control. Speaking of high assurance environments, most of what I've talked about here is consumer focused. And that's where at least 1Password as a credential manager started. But credential managers also serve businesses. I think probably every credential manager here has both a business and a consumer offering. And those groups have very different needs, right? Organizations think about credentials not on an individual level, but across their entire organization, and that creates different problems and challenges that they face around application access. For example, businesses need visibility. With remote work and bring your own device, it can be really challenging to know what applications people are using, how and when are they accessing them, is it secure? And they need that sort of visibility, right? Shadow IT is wildly expensive for companies. It's really risky. They also have compliance requirements, which of course is not something that individual people have. And so a lot of those compliance requirements tend to be around credential management and application access. And then lastly, employees are also just people, and they can use poor security practices with passwords. Unless you're a huge enterprise and you're able to sort of federate access to most of your services, your people are probably using passwords to access some important services. And so they need you to, the business needs people to be using strong passwords and security controls and know when a breach might happen, things like that. And so credential managers can provide this level of security and productivity for employees across an organization. It's things like policies to ensure that businesses can enforce strong security controls, best practices, things like what type of authentication can you use to access a certain site, or maybe restricting sharing of certain credentials in a high-risk environment. We can also provide lifecycle and management for users and credentials. So we can provision credentials straight into your vault when you onboard new employees and make sure they have access to all the right services. We can also offboard employees and remove access immediately to make sure there's not a security risk. And then, of course, insights and visibility, right? Businesses need to know what are the highest risk applications, where has a breach occurred, where am I seeing anomalous behavior with my users? All of this type of stuff helps centralize security for businesses and make sure that their IT admins especially are more productive. And as great as passkeys are, I think that enterprises still need more, right, than just a passkey. Frankly, passkeys alone don't solve a lot of the problems I just talked about, things like insights and lifecycle management, but credential managers do. And so one of the things I'm personally really excited about in the next few years is how we can combine those two. Even just hearing people talk yesterday, I know there's a lot of discomfort with this idea of synced passkeys in the enterprise, but I actually think credential managers can alleviate a lot of those concerns. We can give you a really clear picture of when and where people are using passkeys in your organization. And we can offer assurances on top of passkeys, things like, was this passkey used by a managed device? And we can mediate access based on device context or really any number of criteria. And I think we can then take that and we can give you all the audit logs and visibility you need right in the same place as all of your other credentials, right? This isn't just a passkey solution, it's a credential solution, and it's passkeys and passwords and any other type of authentication all centralized in one place. And I think that's really the power that credential managers can bring to enterprises going forward. So it's really about supporting people as technology evolves. For users, it's giving them as much control as possible over their digital identity. And then for businesses, it's giving them the tools to be more secure and more productive at the same time. I don't want to discount the tremendous progress that we've made in the last couple years with passkeys, but there are still some gaps, and I really think that credential managers can fill some of those gaps, and I'm really, really excited to work on it. Thanks so much for listening. I'll be around all week if anyone wants to chat more. Thanks.